This will also help us figure out, well, what's going to happen when the price drops? What's going to happen to how much benefit and value consumers get from this market? So it's going to turn out there's going to be two different things that happen. And this idea of consumer surplus is going to help us separate. So first of all, we can just think, well, what's the new consumer surplus going to be? Again, it's going to be the triangle below the demand curve, above the price for the units that get sold. So what's happening now with this new supply curve? Well, we still have this area below the demand curve. We have this price. Here's the units that get sold. There should be this whole triangle all the way out to that equilibrium point and back, right? That whole triangle. But there's two different ways in which the triangle is increasing in size. We got this area over here, right? These are all the people who were already buying stuff, but now they get a better deal on it, right? So I was already buying an apple for $3. I was getting $2 of surplus out of it. The price dropped to $2. Now I'm getting $3 of surplus out of it. It's great. I was going to buy an apple anyway. You didn't need to drop the price to make me do it, but great. I'm getting a better deal now. I'm very happy with that. But there's also this area over here. Anybody guess as to what that little triangle over there represents? Who are those people? Yeah.
People that are going to buy more because the price dropped.
Exactly. These are people who either were not buying before or they are not buying as much. Right now they're going to buy more and they're going to get value from those units, right? If you're out there and you're thinking, you know what, apples are $3. I only value an apple at $2.75. I'm not going to do it, right? You get zero consumer surplus from that apple because you didn't buy it. Your price drops to $2, suddenly you are going to buy it. And now you're going to get 75 cents of consumer surplus. And there you are, right there. So we have the whole new consumer surplus area. So as the price drops, right, you get people who are just getting a better deal. You also get new people coming into the market, or at least new people buying stuff that they weren't buying before, or old people buying more than they were before. And they're getting consumer surplus from those units as well. So we can get a couple basic ideas from this, right? None of these are super surprising. One, people like lower prices. That's not, I hope, a shocker to any of you. And then also the value of something you get doesn't change when the price drops. You're just getting a better deal, right? Notice that when the price dropped here, the actual value that you get out of the apple is still on this line, and this line did not move, right? If I'm here at $5, here's 3, it drops down to 2, I'm still getting $5 out of that apple, right? It's not like I'm like, well, it's cheaper now. I'm not going to enjoy a cheap apple as much as I would an expensive apple, right? That's not happening. It's going to be, I'm still getting $5 of value out of the apple. I'm happier that I'm getting a better deal, but that doesn't make the apple itself tastier. Again, you could get into marketing psychology and say that I'm wrong about that, but we're going to simplify it. All right, let's take an example. So in 2011, long, long ago, Netflix used to rent DVDs. I guess they still do, but nobody gets them, right? And it costs $10 a month for both video streaming and DVD rentals. Okay. Then, in September of 2011, they increased the price from $10 to $16. Now, what they were really doing is they were basically splitting the service. So instead of $10 for both, it was going to be $8 for streaming and $8 for DVD rentals. Okay. But if you were using both of these things before, your price just went up by a significant chunk, by 60%. Right? So let's imagine this is Netflix in August of 2011. They have 23.6 million subscribers. And then they're about to raise their price. And notice I've not drawn a supply curve on here because Netflix is just Netflix. There's not really a competitive market for Netflix, especially in 2011. There was really only Netflix and all the other ones. And so they're in control of the price entirely. They can just choose to raise it. Here's our price. It used to be $10. So we're going to raise the price to 16. And this is September. So we get a couple of predictions out of this. One, we predict that we're going to get less quantity demand. Right? Maybe 1 month is not going to be enough time to see that response. Remember, elasticity, the longer you wait, the more elastic the response is going to be. But we should see that people are going to subscribe less. People are going to cancel their subscriptions because the price just went up. Right? We also see that there's going to be two different kinds of people who are affected negatively by this price change. One, you get people who are going to keep their subscription anyway, but they're going to get a worse deal on it. And you have people who are actually going to cancel their subscription. They're going to say, you know what? I was getting maybe, $12 of value out of Netflix. So at $10, it was worth it. At 16, I'm out, right? So we did see a very immediate drop in Netflix subscribers. by about 800,000 people canceled their accounts. And so that was pretty, it did turn out to be pretty immediate. It turns out you don't need that much time to cancel your Netflix account. So the elasticity thing was not a huge concern. And then also you have all these people who are still subscribing, the 22.8 million people who are still subscribing, but they just lost a bunch of consumer surplus, right? Which they're, $6 a month each, about $136.8 million of consumer surplus wiped out. So they're not happy about it, right? Unsurprisingly, this is a Facebook thread from one day after they announced the price change. Had about 40,000 comments on it. And by this point, it's about 80,000 very negative people yelling at Netflix for raising their prices. A lot of death threats and things like that. Over $6 a month. I mean, you've all been on the internet, you know how it is. So this anger is very real, right? So from the perspective of the customers, they just lost $6 a month in value. Even if Netflix is still worth it to them, then they're still losing $6 a month of value that they would have had otherwise, right? You wouldn't like it if somebody just started charging you $6 a month for something that you weren't paying for before. I mean, in this case, it's not from free to $6. It's from $10 to $16. But from an economic point of view, that's the same thing, right? There's not really a difference there. So you would not like it if somebody increased the price of this by $6. However, people do follow incentives, right? If people were really that angry about it, they would all have canceled their accounts, even if Netflix was still worth it at 16. But no, most of them did not, right? They lost less than 1 million. They still had 23 million people, right? So people generally came to the conclusion that Netflix was still worth more than $16 to them. So even if they're angry about it, they're still paying for it, right? You can take that story in two different ways, really. So for a lot of people, the $16 or $8 for only one of the two services was still worth it, even if it was not worth it as much before. And then, of course, you can think about all the changes with Netflix in the 10 years since then. It has become a much more valuable service, but also got a lot more competitors. Was it like 57 million, maybe even more by now, subscribers at this point, related to a shift in demand as well. So this is an example of a price change, and we can see it playing out in the different parts of consumer surplus. All right. Let me show you as well the producer surplus side of this. And it's a very similar idea. Okay. Here's our price for each unit that's getting sold, right? Whoever sold me that apple, maybe here's their apple right down here, cost them 50 cents. They sold it to me for $3. So the difference between the $3 and the 50 cents, that is their producer surplus, right? For that they got from selling that one apple. And then over here, we have somebody who's it costs a little bit higher, but here's what they got paid for it. There's their producer surplus. And over here, and here, and here, and here, 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 here. And we end up with a triangle as well that represents the producer surplus, which is how much benefit the producers get out of the existence of that market, right? How much better off are they because that market exists, as opposed to if it did not, they all had to go do something else with their time rather than growing apples. We can put them together as well. Here's our price, B star. The consumer surplus up here, again, it's the part that touches the demand curve. So that's how we know which one of these two is the consumer surplus. With the producer surplus down here, and the total of them together, draw a little mini one, is the total surplus. Okay, that's how much benefit is being brought to society as a whole, either consumers or producers, because of the existence of this market. So from this, we can see, right, how much benefit is being produced by this market overall. You can also sort of see how it's being distributed a little bit. And we'll get more into this later, but there's sort of hints of what people are getting out of this market. It's not like a competition between producers and consumers. But you can see how elasticity, for example, changes things. What if we have a really steep demand curve like this? Here's the price, here's the producer surplus, and then the consumer surplus is like, whoa, way up there, right? Giant sort of area, right? Because it covers the entire area underneath the demand curve. If the first couple of units of this are really, really, really valuable, then hey, there's going to be a lot of consumer surplus from this market, and the consumers are getting quite a lot of it that they would not have if it went away. Same thing with producer surplus. You can imagine if it's very inelastic there. And we can see what's going to happen with shifts as well. Right? What's happening if we get a supply shift to the right? We had consumer surplus, producer surplus before. Supply shifts to the right. Well, now we're going to get a different consumer surplus, producer surplus. I mean, unsurprisingly, consumer surplus is going to be bigger than it was before. Right, so now here, this area is consumer surplus, eating up some of the producer surplus area. But is producer surplus getting smaller? Not necessarily, right? Because we now also have sort of this area over here that we didn't have before. So it's not quite clear whether producer surplus is going to get bigger or smaller. We do know that's going to change, right? So some of that's not too surprising, right? If the price goes down, consumer surplus gets bigger. Same thing happens in the other direction, it gets smaller, the price goes up. If demand shifts, that's really going to tell us what's going to happen with the producer surplus, right? If you're producing a good that everyone decides they really want it, yeah, that's going to be good for you. You're going to get a producer surplus that goes up out of that. But when your own side shifts, it's not quite so clear what's going to happen. Is it going to be good for you or not? Which we can think about going back to the agriculture example, right? When we talked about the increased productivity in agriculture, supply curve shifted way to the right as it got way more efficient. But also, that ended up with lower prices. So was the producer surplus in the agricultural sector going up or down? It's not quite clear, right? We have to think a bit more about that.